Good evening, America. I am the Big Red One guy, reminding you that together we must break the machine. In case you kind of missed it, the Supreme Court came down with a landmark decision today. They actually had another one on Friday of last week, and they're 2-0 right now. So both these decisions are going to be very, very effective of preserving our Constitution. The most recent uh, conservative court hasn't really been that conservative. They've kind of sided with the government on a lot of things, which kind of sucks. So for like every win, we have a loss when it comes to the Supreme Court recently. Although they have been kind of smacking down the ATF and everything, and one of the articles I'm going to get into today is going to kind of be representative of what the ATF will now not be able to do, even though it doesn't the case didn't have to do with the ETF. I've mentioned in my previous one of my previous videos that the three-letter mobs, they make these regulations, and the ATF is very big on doing that, and they make regulations that essentially make legal gun owners violent felons in the eyes of the law. So two big landmark decisions. The big one today was the presidential immunity. So that affects Trump and his case that's going on with Jack Smith, but it also affects past presidents and our current president, and it affects future presidents, right? So I'm going to get into both these articles. They're both by the Gateway Pundit, and I'll leave the links in the description. So if you guys want to click on it and read it, you can kind of go ahead and get into it. So I'm going to try not to go too long with reading them because there's quite a bit of detail in both these articles. And then you could just kind of go on your own and look at it. So I'm just going to kind of cover them very quickly. So let's get into the first one. Breaking. This is from the Gateway Pundit, article by Christina Layla. Can't keep getting her name wrong. And this is from today. Breaking. Trump wins. Supreme Court rules 6-3 on presidential immunity. Court holds that a former president has absolute immunity for the core constitutional powers. Okay, so I'm gonna break this down a little bit for you. The Supreme Court on Monday ruled 6-3 that Trump has absolute immunity for his core constitutional powers. Former presidents are entitled to at least a presumption of immunity for their official acts. The Supreme Court ruled there is no immunity for unofficial acts. So a lot of people kind of been online saying that this will affect everything. It doesn't. It's just affects essentially his time in office and any decisions he made as the president while in office. Anything that happens in his personal life is still going to go on. The crap that's going on in New York, the bullshit. His sentencing is coming up on July 11th, and I personally feel they're probably going to sentence him to jail. I don't know how that's going to blow over with the rest of the country, but New York is a very corrupt state. So I just, all the whole thing that went on in New York has been very corrupt. So I don't see him getting any leeway in the state of New York. It says the court rules for Trump. The court holds that a former president has absolute immunity for his core constitutional powers. And then there's like in the article there's the what was dropped by the what do you call the Supreme Court, and you can read it on your own. I'm not going to read that part, but it says early this year the Supreme Court agreed to hear Trump's presidential immunity claim in special counsel Jack Smith's January 6th case in Washington D.C. Trump's lawyers argued that Trump is immune from federal prosecution for alleged crimes committed while he served as U.S. president. And this is one of their arguments. This is in 234 years of American history. No president ever faced criminal prosecution for his official acts until 19 days ago. This must have been when it all went down. No court had ever addressed whether immunity from such prosecution exists, Trump's lawyers wrote in the last month's filing, according to CBS News. To this day, no appellate court has addressed it. The question stands among the most complex, intricate, and momentous issues that the court will be called on to decide. In February, President Trump asked the Supreme Court to pause the immunity ruling in Jack Smith's January 6th case in D.C. after a federal appeals court stacked with Biden judges denied Trump presidential immunity claims. So he went through the process. Like he couldn't just go straight to the Supreme Court, although there is a emergency avenue for severe things, that can go right to the Supreme Court. But he's been following the process, okay? And part of the appellate process is what's holding up him, actually going to trial. So he has to be allowed to do that. There's a three-judge panel for the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. It's in D.C. D.C. is a complete and total Marxist swamp. ruled on Trump immunity claims Florence Pan, a Biden appointee, Michelle Childs, a Biden appointee, and Karen Henderson, a George W. Bush appointee. So it doesn't matter that she was appointed by Bush. She's a Marxist as well. We have balanced former President Trump's asserted interest in executive immunity against the vital public interest that favor allowing this prosecution to proceed. The three-judge panel rose. So essentially, they were like, "Fuck you, Trump. We're just going to do what we want. We're going to break the law, and we're not going to, honor an appeal, and we're not going to honor presidential immunity." We conclude that the concerns of public policy, especially as illuminated by our history and the structure of our government, compel the rejection of his claim of immunity in this case, they wrote. Jack Smith's January 6th trial may be postponed past November. So that's like a good thing, okay? That's a really, really good thing. So what's going to happen now, and what you have to understand is that this stuff's now going to go back to it has to go back to I've read a little bit more on some other articles. What the Supreme Court essentially said was that yes, he's in presidential capacity as the president, he has immunity, right? Because if we're going to prosecute presidents for what they've done while they were president. If it's not like a legit crime, okay, how are we going to do that? So, uh, but what they did say is anything that in an unofficial capacity, essentially in his personal life, any laws he might have broken, he's not immune to that. So it's only what has happened under him being president. So with the January 6th stuff, with the records that they were saying that he took and that he shouldn't have been able to took, that all kind of goes back to this to this DC Circuit Court, okay, and they have to figure out essentially what they told the lower court is you have to figure out what has been official and what isn't. Okay, you can't just be arbitrary saying, well, it doesn't matter that he was the president of the United States at the time. So that they basically told the DC Court of Appeals, the lower court, to go fuck themselves, and that you're violating the rule of law by making this decision, and you're wrong. All right, so it's good for president, not just President Trump. It's good for even President Biden. Okay, we can't go after Biden, and we can't go after Obama. Obama killed civilians while he was freaking American civilians in foreign countries with drone strikes. Right. So imagine, he was trying to hit terrorist stuff, and he hit Americans while that were there that were unfortunately part of the. What do you call it? Terrorist organizations, but he killed American citizens, right? So what if we went back and decided to charge him for that? Right? Plenty of people think that he's a criminal for doing that. So what the Supreme Court said today is like, no, we're not having that. So that's the good thing, okay? And um, they also had another decision that was really really good, okay? And you know, I have to tell you, I'm happy that they made this decision. This decision was on Friday, okay? And we what do you call it? We won on Friday. So there was another case involving Chevron. So in my video about the FBI going after the whistleblower, I made mention of how the courts over the years have kind of made deference to uh, the agencies and they've been letting them make regulation rules and stuff like that, and Congress has kind of let them do it too because of this specific case, Chevron. So I'm going to get into it and read it briefly so that you guys can understand what it entails and how this is a big 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 fuck you to the deep state, and it's really good. So America, we got to win on Friday, and we got to win today too. So let's get into it. uh Breaking: Chevron is gone. SCOTUS rules unelected. Sorry, Jesus, I'm having issues here. Rules unelected bureaucrats do not have the power to create laws. In a landmark decision, the Supreme Court has overturned the long standing Chevron doctrine, fundamentally altering the balance of power between the judiciary and federal agencies. The ruling, which came in the case of Loper Bright Enterprises et al. Versus Raimondo, Secretary of Commerce, marks a significant shift in the balance of power between the branches of government. The Chevron doctrine, established in 1984 case Chevron USA, that's the oil company, versus Natural Resources Defense Council, has long been a source of contention. It granted deference to federal agencies in interpreting ambiguous statutes, effectively allowing unelected bureaucrats to make laws through their regulatory actions. So essentially, they're not really making laws, because the only way to make a law is you have to go through Congress and the Senate, and then the president has to actually sign it into law, right? But what they're doing is they're taking whatever existing laws are in place, and they're making these really arbitrary regulations to say, well, it's within the guidelines of the laws, and by de facto essentially making law via being a freaking bureaucrat and not an elected official that actually drafted a bill and put it before the House for the House to vote on, and all that other stuff. So, this is a big thing. It says, however, by a 6-3 majority, SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States, has now declared that such power is unconstitutional and goes against the principles of democratic governance. It's fucking A. Chevron is overruled. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote in the majority opinion, courts must exercise their independent judgment in deciding whether an agency has acted within its statutory authority. Chief Justice Roberts emphasized that the role of interpreting laws and making policy decisions should rest with elected representatives in Congress, not with unaccountable agency officials. The ruling has been hailed by critics of regulatory overreach as a victory for the separation of powers and the rule of law. And the blog reported, says Chevron, Roberts explains, defies the command of the Administrative Procedure Act, the law governing federal administrative agencies. So that's the law. The Administrative Procedure Act is kind of the law that these agencies skirt, okay? And they come up with these really terrible regulations that essentially make people criminals without actually it being a law in place, just regulations, right? So it's not, like I said, not going through the House and the Senate and having any kind of judicial review, and going to the president to sign actually into law. So, the ATF recently lost with the bump stock thing, okay, that they made their regulations, and they also lost recently with the kind of the sidearm, the what do you call it, uh pistol braces as well, that got smacked down by the Supreme Court. So Supreme Court is kind of coming down hard on this, so I'm glad. And it says, Federal Court was an action of users to decide all relevant questions of law and interpret statutory provisions. It requires a court to ignore, not follow, the reading the court would have reached had it exercised its independent judgment as required by the APA. Chevron's presumption that statutory ambiguities are implicit delegations of authority by Congress to federal agencies is misguided, Roberts explained, because agencies have no special competence in resolving statutory ambiguities. Courts do. So that again, it's really a big thing for the deep state, man. Fucking them over. Roberts notes that today's decision does not call into question prior cases that relied on the Chevron framework. The holdings of those cases that specific agencies' actions are lawful, including the Clean Air Act holding of Chevron itself, is still subject to statutory stare diseases despite our change in interpretive methodology. So the decision comes with the concurrence of Justice Thomas and Gorsuch, who added their perspectives, underscoring the constitutional necessity of judicial independence and statutory interpretation. I'm not going to keep reading that. I'm just going to leave that the links for you. So essentially, like I said, they what do you call it? They told uh, big government and they told Big Brother to go fuck yourselves, and that's a good thing. You know, uh, you want it so that they're not being able to make regulations. You don't want any of the three-letter mobs to be able to make regulations to ruin your life. And that is the one thing that the ATF has done consistently. They have made rules, in particular, to go after law-abiding citizens who own weapons, okay, pistols and rifles and everything. They do all kinds of stuff to try to make whatever weapon you have illegal, so they can go and either take you to jail or confiscate your weapons, right? So because that's what they really, really want to do. They want to take your weapons. They want the government to have full force, okay, and not the populace to be able to be afforded their right under the Second Amendment. So this is a big day, really, really, really good day for us, and a good day for the American population, for the citizens. Good for presidents, past, present, and future. Okay, it's we can't we. Presidents wouldn't be able to do their job if they were thinking constantly, "Am I gonna fucking go to jail for every decision I make while acting as the president?" So again, the first decision doesn't stop anything in President Trump's personal life. This is just things that affected it, things that they're trying to go after him while he was still the president. And then the second one is essentially they have told the deep states that to go fuck yourselves. The Constitution and the rule of law comes before anything, and unelected bureaucrats don't have the right to make regulations and make de facto laws through fucking absurd and ambiguous regulations, skirting the laws that they're supposed to be making these regulations based on, right? So anyway, thank you, America, for tuning in. Thank you for listening. God bless you. God bless America. And don't forget that I am the big red one guy, signing out and reminding you that together we must break the machine. Oh, by the way, don't forget to like and subscribe.